My name is Riley Morgan. I'm 28 years old. I've always thought of myself as practical, organized, someone who knows what she wants in life, but I never imagined that trusting a man could make my heart feel both fluttering and wary at the same time. I'm engaged, or at least that's the plan. The apartment smelled faintly of vanilla candles and freshly laundered linen, a comforting warmth that made the air feel safe. I sat on the edge of the couch, tracing the rim of my wine glass with my fingertip, watching the sunset streak across Thomas's living room. He was sprawled across the other side, laptop balanced on his knees, eyes glued to spreadsheets and emails, completely absorbed. I couldn't help smiling. He always made work look effortless, like some magic trick I'd never fully understand. "Hey," I said softly, tapping his shoulder. He looked up, flashing that familiar, easy smile that had made my heart flutter from our very first date. "You're staring again," he said, closing his laptop. "Something on your mind?" "Just us," I murmured, letting warmth creep into my chest. "Can you believe we've been engaged for 14 months? He chuckled and shook his head. "Feels like yesterday we were in Charleston, arguing over whether seagulls were cute or terrifying." I laughed, the sound light, carefree. Memories of that trip came rushing back. The way he brought me soup when I had the flu, stayed up late just to make me laugh when I couldn't sleep. The quiet reassurance in his voice when I felt unsure about everything. Love had never felt this tangible before, and yet, a whisper of caution tugged at me. I glanced at the neatly stacked wedding planning notebooks and invoices on the coffee table. We'd booked the venue, paid the deposits, finalized the guest list. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect, maybe. "Thomas," I said, my voice gaining a tentative edge, "can we talk about something serious for a moment?" His brow furrowed slightly. "Of course. What's up?" I took a deep breath, steadying my racing thoughts. "The prenup." For a brief second, his expression softened into understanding, then flickered with something else, a hint of unease I almost missed. "Right. I thought we already discussed that months ago," he said. "We did," I replied quickly. "And I appreciate that. I just want to make sure we're both protected. I'm not asking because I don't trust you. I'm asking because it's practical. You know my savings, my investments. I just want clarity before we sign on the dotted line." He nodded slowly, leaning back into the couch. "I get it, Riley. Honestly. You're smart, responsible. I respect that. Let's get our lawyers to draft something fair, nothing extreme, just protection for both of us." Relief washed over me. I had feared hesitation, resistance, but his words soothed that fear, at least for the moment. We spent the next hour sipping wine and daydreaming aloud. Honeymoon destinations, a balanced guest list, the color scheme for the flowers. Laughter flowed easily, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself everything would stay this way. Simple, happy, uncomplicated. Yet, the seed of unease lingered. Thomas's hesitation had been subtle but present, a flicker behind his eyes when we talked about legal terms. I pushed it aside, blaming wedding stress. Who wants to think about divorce when imagining a life together? Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the whirlwind of color swatches, tastings, and seating charts. I relished the joy of creating something tangible, a celebration of love. But deep down, my practical side hummed quietly, a reminder that life could be messy, people unpredictable, and intentions not always pure. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, the moment came. We were at Thomas's apartment, reviewing the final details for our Bali honeymoon, when I casually pulled the folder from my tote. "So," I said, sliding the papers across the table, "my lawyer finalized this. You'll just need to review and sign." Thomas's fingers hovered over the top page, his expression unreadable. Then he pushed the folder back toward me. "I'm not signing this," he said flatly. I blinked, unsure I'd heard him correctly. "Excuse me?" "I'm not signing a prenup, Riley," he repeated, jaw tight. "I've thought about it. If you really loved me, you wouldn't ask me to do this." A jolt of disbelief shot through me. The words weren't just unexpected. They were manipulative, dangerous. "Thomas," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we agreed months ago. You understood why it's necessary. This isn't about love. It's about fairness and protection, for both of us." He shook his head, the smile that usually softened his features gone. "You think I don't love you? You think I'm some businessman plotting against you?" "I think you're ignoring reality," I replied firmly, sliding the folder back toward him. "I'm not giving up my protection. This is non-negotiable. The prenup happens, or the wedding doesn't." For a heartbeat, the room hung in tense silence. Then he laughed. Not a joyful laugh, but one edged with disbelief and scorn. "You're bluffing," he said. "I'm not," I said, my throat tight, heart pounding. "I will leave if you refuse to sign. Wedding postponed indefinitely. That's reality." His face went red, a mixture of shock and anger. You can't be serious." "Dead serious," I said, standing. The air between us felt brittle, tense, like a storm rolling in. "I love you, Thomas. But I also respect myself. I cannot, will not ignore this. The choice is yours." He stared at me as if I had just betrayed him. And in a sense, he had, not me, but the truth. I grabbed my purse, voice steady but low. "Call me when you've calmed down." I walked out, each step heavy but resolute. Outside, the city lights twinkled, oblivious to the turmoil raging in my chest. I took a deep breath of the cool evening air. The future was suddenly uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would not compromise my integrity for love, no matter how deep. I glanced back once at his apartment, a pang of longing twisting with the bitter taste of betrayal. Then I turned and walked into the night, determined to face whatever came next. The morning after I walked out of Thomas's apartment, the city felt eerily quiet. My phone vibrated constantly, but I ignored it. Each notification was like a hammer striking the fragile reality I'd built in my head. Thomas's name flashed repeatedly, followed by frantic texts from his friends and even his parents. I didn't respond. Not yet. I poured myself coffee, the bitter aroma grounding me. I replayed the scene over and over, his jaw tight, the laugh that didn't reach his eyes, the words that twisted love into guilt. How could someone I trusted so completely turn a simple legal safeguard into a test of loyalty? By the end of the day, the truth started to reveal itself. A text arrived from an unknown number, screenshots, messages between Thomas and someone named Brooke, a friend I'd met a few times, from months ago. I scrolled, disbelief sharpening into shock. Strategy, manipulation, premeditated plans to refuse the prenup at the last minute. They planned this, I thought, my stomach twisting. Deposits paid, venue booked, guests invited, everything engineered to make me cave. The calculated betrayal was suffocating. I sat down, laptop open, forwarding everything to my lawyer. Each screenshot, each message was evidence of deliberate manipulation. I wanted to confront him immediately, but a voice in my head whispered caution. Don't react in anger. Document everything. So I resisted the urge to dial. I drafted a mental plan. Group chat with his parents, his friends, everyone who had been involved, then block numbers, cut off channels, reclaim control. It started slowly. I created the chat, sent the screenshots, added a single message. "This is why the wedding is canceled permanently. Please stop contacting me." Then I left the chat, blocking all numbers. Silence followed, a small victory in the chaos. But the fallout was nuclear. Messages flooded in from blocked numbers, voicemails, even social media platforms. People I barely knew reached out, attempting to mediate or scold. I ignored them all. For the first time, the surreal clarity of betrayal hit me. Thomas's refusal wasn't fear or cold feet. It was manipulation. 2 days later, his mother appeared at my apartment. Patricia Whitmore, poised but visibly upset, tissue in hand, ready for confrontation. "Riley," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "please, just talk to my son. He loves you. He wouldn't do this if he didn't care." I stood, composed but resolute. "Patricia, I have nothing to say I haven't already said to Thomas. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm responding to deliberate manipulation. Love doesn't justify deceit." Her eyes softened, then hardened. "You think you're better than him because of money. That's your problem, Riley. But you could have compromised, been understanding." I shook my head. There's no compromise in betrayal. This isn't fear. It's a calculated plan to manipulate, to pressure, to force me into surrendering what's rightfully mine. That's not love, and that's not marriage. She left in a huff, muttering under her breath. Relief and bitterness battled in my chest. I sat alone, staring at the city skyline, heart pounding. My world had shifted overnight. Thomas, the man I had trusted, had weaponized love. And then the text messages from Brooke, the strategist, arrived. Her advice was cruel in its simplicity. Delay, refuse at the last moment, force him to cave. The evidence was undeniable. Every manipulation, every plan to make me surrender had been orchestrated months in advance. I felt a surge of righteous anger. I wasn't naive. I saw the strings being pulled. I printed everything, labeled it clearly. Manipulation evidence. My lawyer confirmed. These documents were ironclad, protecting me if Thomas tried any legal retaliation. By the end of the week, I made my decision. No engagement ring, no wedding, no compromise. I sold the ring back to the jeweler, got about 60% of what I paid. A small consolation, but a symbolic reclaiming of power. I threw myself into work, focusing on my career and finances, grounding myself in control I hadn't felt in weeks. Friends checked in regularly. They reminded me I had dodged a bullet, that anyone who manipulates trust so openly isn't worth heartbreak. Their support was balm, but the pain lingered, subtle yet persistent, a shadow of the man I thought I knew. Then came the handwritten letter from Thomas. 5 pages, delivered via certified mail, carefully constructed to tug at every possible emotional chord. Vulnerability, therapy, childhood trauma, recollections of romantic gestures. I never meant to manipulate you, Riley. I was scared. I love you. Let's talk. I read it once, twice, then set it aside. The words were beautiful, almost believable, but I knew the foundation was rotten. Someone who could plan months of manipulation doesn't suddenly pivot to honesty out of love. I didn't respond. In the quiet aftermath, I started reflecting on what had gone wrong, what I had missed. Thomas's charm had been real. Those small acts of love weren't fake, but his choices in crisis revealed a side I hadn't known. Calculated, strategic, manipulative. A man who values control over partnership is not a man to build a marriage with. The fallout extended beyond us. His friends and family were furious, not at Thomas, not even at the manipulation, but at the exposure of private messages. Thomas's circle of influence shifted, some cutting him off quietly. I was left in a calm but tense solitude, a strange peace born from clarity. I realized then love and trust are precious, but integrity is non-negotiable. Someone willing to bend morality for temporary advantage, no matter how charming, isn't a partner. They're a lesson. And this lesson, as painful as it was, had spared me a lifetime of compromise and heartbreak. The city lights blinked below my apartment, indifferent to human drama. I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth seep in. I felt sadness, yes, but also relief. I had survived manipulation, reclaimed my voice, and understood, with painful clarity, that love without honesty is not love at all. The days that followed felt like moving through fog. My phone buzzed endlessly at first, but I refused to answer. Thomas, his friends, his family, they all wanted something from me. Explanation, compromise, forgiveness. I gave nothing. Silence became my shield, and in that silence, clarity began to grow. I sorted through the emails, messages, and screenshots one by one, categorizing evidence of manipulation. Each file told the same story. Brooke coaching Thomas, strategies mapped out months in advance, every plan designed to make me surrender the prenup. The betrayal wasn't a spur-of-the-moment panic. It was cold, calculated, premeditated. A sense of righteous anger took root. I wasn't just a victim. I was someone who had been intentionally tested, trapped in a scenario meant to break my resolve, and I wouldn't let it. I created a secure folder on my laptop labeled Manipulation Evidence. Copies went to my lawyer. Documentation could be my strongest defense if this escalated legally. I also decided to reclaim control in another, quieter way. I created a group chat with Thomas, his parents, and the extended circle that had been attempting to mediate, forwarding key screenshots with a single message. This is why the wedding is permanently canceled. Stop contacting me. Then I left. I blocked numbers, muted notifications. For the first time in weeks, I felt the thrill of autonomy. The reactions came in waves. Voicemails, social media messages, even LinkedIn notifications flooded in from blocked numbers. They were frantic, confused, angry, or pleading. I ignored them all. I realized that the fallout wasn't about me. It was about Thomas losing control of the narrative. He had tried to manipulate not just me, but the people around me, and now that scheme had collapsed. Then, a letter arrived. Thomas's handwriting sprawled across 5 pages, delicate yet desperate. Riley, I know I hurt you. I never meant to manipulate you. I love you. I'm in therapy. I read it twice, the words pulling at the corners of my heart. They referenced childhood trauma, abandonment fears, even the night of our first date when he brought me soup while I was sick. Everything was designed to tug at guilt, fear, hope, and nostalgia all at once. But I didn't respond. For days, I replayed every moment, every gesture, every laugh and touch. His actions now loomed larger than his words. The carefully plotted last-minute refusal, the coordination with Brooke. It wasn't fear, it was strategy, and no letter could undo that. In the midst of this chaos, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. I had lost a relationship I had once trusted completely, but I had also avoided a lifetime of compromise, deceit, and emotional manipulation. I realized that preserving integrity was more valuable than preserving any illusion of love. Friends became my anchor. Over wine and long walks, they reminded me I had made the right choice. "You dodged a bullet," they said. And they were right. It didn't erase the pain, but it reframed it. Pain as survival, betrayal as lesson, heartbreak as liberation. Even Thomas's family became distant after the truth surfaced. Some quietly disapproved of his manipulation. Others resented me for exposing private conversations. The network he had relied on for influence unraveled in silence. It was poetic justice, though I didn't feel the need to savor it. I just observed, detached, finally at peace in the knowledge that truth had won. I sold the engagement ring back to the jeweler, reclaiming a portion of what I had invested, not just financially, but emotionally. I threw myself into work, projects, and personal growth. The business and my career became my fortress, a reminder that independence and self-respect are priceless. And in the quiet, I allowed myself reflection. I realized that Thomas's charm, the small acts of care, the laughter, the late-night conversations, had been real. But his choices in the face of conflict revealed his true priorities. Manipulation, not partnership. Control, not compromise. Strategy, not love. I let the city lights wash over me from my apartment window, sipping coffee as I wrote in my journal. I felt sadness, yes, but also clarity. Love and trust are precious, but integrity is non-negotiable. Anyone willing to bend morality for advantage is not a partner. They are a lesson. And I had learned mine. By the end of that week, I was no longer reacting to the chaos. I had regained control over my life, my narrative, and my heart. I was ready to move forward. Not with Thomas, not with his manipulation, but with myself, whole and unbroken. The weeks stretched on, each one slower than the last, until the rawness of betrayal softened into something more manageable, clarity. I had rebuilt my boundaries, my routines, my sense of self. I realized that the man I thought I knew, Thomas, had never been a partner in the truest sense. He had been a test, a mirror reflecting what I could tolerate, and I had refused to compromise my integrity. I spent mornings in quiet reflection, journaling the storm of the last few months. The handwritten letter from Thomas sat on the shelf, unopened, a relic of manipulation that no longer had power over me. The engagement ring, sold and gone, had been a symbolic release, a way to reclaim the emotional space that had been hijacked by betrayal. Even the small victories mattered. I sorted through the remnants of wedding plans, photographer contracts, floral deposits, invitations, closing accounts, canceling services, reclaiming control. Each call, each email was a reminder. I am no longer subject to someone else's scheme. I am accountable only to myself. Friends became lifelines. Wine-fueled late nights, long walks in the city, quiet dinners filled with laughter and shared stories. They reminded me that love and trust exist, but not at the cost of personal dignity. I had been brave, steadfast, and, most importantly, honest with myself. Family, too, slowly stitched themselves back into the picture. My parents called less about the wedding and more about me. How I was, how I felt, how I was recovering. Their pride was quiet but unmistakable. My father said, "Integrity matters more than romance." My mother simply held my hand and nodded, eyes glistening. The support reminded me I was not alone, even when betrayal had made the world feel small and isolating. And then came the realization I had been avoiding. The story itself. I had been manipulated, yes, but I had survived, documented, and learned. I began sharing my experience with a close circle, carefully, as a way to process and transform pain into insight. I discovered that speaking the truth was empowering. Each retelling reaffirmed that I had acted with integrity, that the end of the engagement was not a failure but a triumph over deception. Social circles began to shift too. Some people who had previously taken Thomas's side quietly withdrew. Brooke, the mastermind of the manipulation, faded into silence as her influence crumbled. Thomas's narrative, once one of charm and romance, unraveled under the weight of evidence. Watching it fall apart from a distance, I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, just relief. I began to notice small joys again, the quiet mornings with coffee, the smell of the city after rain, a text from a friend with no hidden agenda, no manipulation, just care. Life felt lighter, unburdened by schemes or games. The heartbreak lingered, but it was now tempered with wisdom and perspective. And love. I realized love exists, but it requires honesty, partnership, and mutual respect. I had glimpsed it with Thomas, yes, but I had also seen its absence. And that absence had taught me more than comfort ever could. I knew I could love again, but I would do so with eyes wide open, aware of the difference between affection and manipulation, romance and strategy. As the sun set over the city skyline one evening, I held my journal close, reading my own words, the record of betrayal and survival. I felt a surge of gratitude for my intuition, my courage, my refusal to compromise integrity. I had been tested and I had endured. I had been betrayed and yet remained unbroken. I smiled quietly to myself. Life was mine again, unshackled and free. No more schemes, no more manipulation, no more false pretenses, just truth, resilience, and the certainty that I had done the hardest thing right. I honored myself. The chapter with Thomas was over, not with bitterness, but with clarity, not with resentment, but with a hard-earned peace. I was ready for the next chapter, one I would write for myself, on my terms. The city lights blinked below, indifferent yet comforting, and for the first time in months, I felt whole. Weeks turned into months, and the raw ache of betrayal became a quiet hum of memory. I, Riley Morgan, realized that surviving Thomas's manipulation had changed me, not in bitterness, but in strength. I had emerged from the wreckage of a carefully orchestrated deceit with my integrity intact, my mind clear, and my heart cautious, but open. The apartment felt different now. No wedding plans cluttering the space, no anxious texts or calls, just me, my books, my music, and a renewed sense of ownership over my life. Every corner of my home seemed to whisper, "This is yours. You decide the narrative now." I returned to routines that had once felt mundane, finding solace in simplicity. Morning runs through the quiet streets, coffee in hand. Watching the city wake became meditative. Work demanded focus and creativity, and I poured my energy into projects that made me proud. Slowly, confidence returned in ways that weren't dependent on another person's approval. Occasionally, I heard rumors about Thomas, his circle fractured, his image tarnished in their small social network. But I felt no schadenfreude. The lesson had already been learned. What mattered was my story, my choices, and the knowledge that I had acted with honesty and foresight when confronted with deception. I allowed myself small joys, almost hidden moments of happiness, an unexpected text from a friend with no agenda, laughter spilling freely over dinner with my family, a quiet night reading by candlelight. These moments were unremarkable to the outside world, but for me, they symbolized freedom. Freedom from manipulation, freedom from pretense, freedom from giving power over my happiness to someone who had not deserved it. I also allowed myself reflection on love, not naive or starry-eyed, but grounded and thoughtful. I realized that love is not just affection, chemistry, or shared laughter. True love requires honesty, transparency, and mutual respect. It cannot survive deception, strategy, or manipulation. I would love again someday, but I would do so with clarity, wisdom, and a stronger sense of self. The engagement ring, now gone, was a symbol I no longer needed. The memories of Thomas, the laughter, the gestures, the moments that had felt so real, were not erased, but reframed. I saw them as lessons, not loss. I had learned to distinguish between affection and manipulation, charm and deceit. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the city in gold and rose, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked out over the streets below. I smiled softly, a quiet gratitude swelling inside me. Life had been unkind in some ways, but it had given me clarity, resilience, and perspective I might never have gained otherwise. I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, "This is my story, my heart, my choices, my life. I will honor myself first and let the rest follow naturally." I closed my journal and leaned back in my chair, feeling a sense of completion, but also anticipation. The horizon beyond the city lights was vast, full of possibilities. I didn't know what the next chapter would hold, who I would meet, or what adventures awaited, but I knew one thing. I was ready. Ready to live, ready to love, ready to trust myself above all else. The past was a teacher, the present a gift, and the future, well, it was mine to write. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that I could do so without fear.